All right, I think we are officially live.
Beautiful.
Were you able to see? You were able to see how many people were live.
Yeah.
Then, right?
Yeah.
So once a few people start popping in, then we'll get going. Let us know. What hand printer do you have? Do we have the same one?
Okay.
Oh, yours is the Falco. Mine's the Zamzows.
Same thing.
Different.
What's that?
Tomato, right?
It really is.
All right. Well,
6, 7.
okay. So we got people on.
We got people on.
All right, let's go for it. Hey, how's it going, everybody? It is. Thanks for tuning in. It's a beautiful
Man, it is
Saturday morning. It is so nice today. So we're gonna do. This was a class that was requested by some people in the last class. So we're gonna do some pruning today, and we're gonna talk about some of the different equipment. We're gonna talk about how to do a couple of different techniques and things like that. I do want to kind of throw out a quick disclaimer. We're not arborists. We're just kind of guys that love pruning and doing stuff outside. We do have training in it at least, but we're not certified arborists. We're going to show you a few situations where you're going to want somebody to do the pruning for you. So we'll cover that here in a little bit. And this is going to be a little bit different class. I think the last few have been really structured, and as we kind of talked about this one, it's going to be a little bit more free form. We're going to do a little more walking this time, so I hope that you can don't get motion sick as we do some of the walking around and kind of getting through some of this stuff. So to start off, Chris is going to talk about kind of what I always call the big three. The three tools you should have if you're going to do any kind of pruning around the house. These are the ones you really should have. So Chris, take it away.
Perfect. I think the first thing I want to talk about is your basic hand pruner. This is a bypass pruner, which I prefer. Bypass just means those blades never touch. They pass like a pair of scissors would, and you get a much nicer, cleaner cut that way. The other option is an anvil pruner. An anvil has that blunt edge and a blade, and it crushes one side and cuts the other. It just takes your plant a lot longer to heal from a cut like that. So when you're buying your hand pruners, do make sure they're a bypass style pruner, where those blades never touch, they're cutting on both sides. Tree will be much happier and heal a lot quicker.
Think scissors.
Yep, think scissors when you're doing that. So this, I think everybody should definitely have one, because you can do a wide variety from roses to your shrubs to even small branches on a tree.
And I just want to throw something out there. Chris and I have, he's got the Felco variety. Mine's a Zenport, which is kind of a knockoff, but still very high quality. I think a good pair of hand pruners, if you're going to invest in some equipment, start with this. This is the thing you're going to use the most, and you want it to be of high quality, keeping a really sharp blade through multiple cuts, and you will be very happy with these. Take care of them, because it can last you. I've had this set of pruners for I think almost 6 or 7 years now.
Nice.
And
these are almost 20.
Shut
20
up,
years
crazy.
old.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yep. These are almost 20-year-old pruners.
Chris got him when he was 11.
That's right. I was 11. Perfect. But Nolan's right. I've had cheap pruners, and I've broken the handles on them. I've broken the blades. There's nothing more frustrating than cheap equipment. So, number one, I think everybody should have a pair of those. Also, a pair of loppers. Loppers, longer handle. It'll give you more of a good old wrench when you're trying to get that cut. Usually a bigger blade, so go up to a 2-inch branch on those and still bypass. And also very important. But a nice tool to have. And the third one you need is a good old hand saw, just for those bigger branches. Anything over a 2-inch.
Can you see the bend in mine? Did I get it?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is what happens when you loan it to a buddy.
Also nice to have when you're going camping.
Yeah.
But I think those are definitely the big three. Like you need to have at least those three to do your basic pruning in any backyard, really.
And did you talk about why the three?
No, I wasn't sure if we'd show them, like on the 3-cut.
Oh, okay.
Why you would need the saw. I mean, basically the size of the branch is why you're going to need all three.
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing you can do is take your hand pruners and try to get something that's, 1.5 inches diameter.
Which I'm guilty of.
Yeah, I mean, I do it too. I will confess. But I tell you, every single time I do it, I think, oh, I should have grabbed my other pruner.
Yep.
Because it hurts your hand. You know, by the time you get it through, you're knocking your fingers, and it's just not good for the blade. It's not good for the tool. So,
yeah,
preferably you have a tool for different sizes. Anything above about 1.5 inches to 2 inches, you're going to go with your saw. Anything below that, you're going to go in between with your pruner, your lopper, and then your hand pruner.
Yes.
So, okay, so then the next 3 items. These are the kind of the things that are, I would say, they're not necessary, but they're very helpful. And you don't need them for a lot of things. They're a little more specialized, and for a lot of cases, you can get by with the big 3 without these. You can do the same thing. These just make those jobs a little bit easier. So the first one I have here is a pole pruner. So this is for getting way high up into trees. I've had this for a few years. It got a little wrapped up here. But the thing that's nice about this is you can extend it. You can go all the way out to Cory. But you can get really high with something like this. This one has a saw on it, so you can saw branches. If you got smaller stuff, you can actually convert it and do a lopper on it as well. Typically, you'll take the saw off to use the lopper because it just makes it harder to maneuver once you're up in the canopy. But this one just comes off. You just take the blade off, and then you can come by and you got a nice lopper there. So this is it's really handy if you've got some bigger trees and you need to cut some branches off. The next one is just some head shears. These look really new.
They are I just unwrapped them. They are brand spanking new.
So head shears, again, it's not a necessity, but they are really helpful for a handful of different things. Like if you're wanting to shape up this butterfly bush or some of these boxwoods over here. We'll show that a little bit as we go through. But these are really helpful for those situations, to just shear those areas off. It'll make really quick work of smaller branches, new supple growth that's not woody, super woody. So those are really helpful. And then we're not going to show this one because it'll just get too loud. But this is an electric shear. You can also get these in gas, like a 2-cycle. The 2-cycle, I would say, they're going to be quite a bit more expensive, but they're going to be able to cut a lot more. They're going to have a little more strength to them. They're a lot heavier.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing a lot of work, it's going to be a very heavy thing to do over and over again. But this is really nice. It's really light. It just plugs in, and you can do a lot of work with something like this. And again, it's kind of a replacement for your shear. But I would say if you've got a big job, a really big hedge, this would be the one to go with as opposed to this. So those are the 3 kind of not necessities, but the 3 ones that you really want for specialized stuff. What was the next thing, Chris?
Talk about the different parts of a tree or shrub.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So hopefully you can hear, we're kind of close to this road here. So we'll see. Hopefully
we can pick a different tree if we need to.
Yeah, let Cory know if you can't hear me. So what I'm going to quickly talk about here, it's important to know some biology, some really basic biology when you're pruning, because if you're reading an article or you're watching a video, they'll use a lot of different terms that you might not know. They're things that you just they're not in your common vernacular. So to start at the bottom, the first thing is the root flare. So the root flare is this area down here where you've got the roots going into the ground, okay? And it can change depending on how big the tree is, what variety it is, but a lot of times it's kind of right around the first couple feet of the trunk is what's called the root flare. When you look at, you're applying, oh, my shadow's in, oh, okay. When you're looking at things like applying Thrive or tree and shrub, some of the insecticides, and they say, play it around the root zone or close to the root flare, that's what you're looking for, right here in this couple 2-foot area. Next thing is the crown. The crown is this part here at the trunk. You can almost see how it's got this kind of a ridge where it kind of bulges, where the trunk comes down. This is your crown. The crown is the area between the trunk and the roots. This is where the roots come into the trunk. And this is an important spot to know, especially when you're planting your tree. You want to be able to identify the crown so you don't plant it too deeply. If you plant it too deep and this crown gets covered by soil, you're going to risk a lot of root rot, you're going to risk rot, and you're going to have some serious problems with the tree later down the road. Okay, so then moving up, we're going to get into, what was the next thing? I think the branch collar.
The branch collar.
So
maybe Cory is in the shadow. It's super hard to see. Or maybe have Cory over here.
Oh, okay.
Can you see that? Okay. So I'm talking about the branch collar. The branch collar is this real rough piece of bark. It goes right around, right where the branch meets that. And you'll see that throughout the whole stem. But this real rugged piece of bark right here, that's the branch collar. So whenever you're doing a prune, you want to make sure you don't disturb that or don't cut it or don't wound it, because that's the piece of bark that's going to swell over and seal your wound up. So you want to leave that, but not leave a nub. If you're making a cut out here, this branch collar, you can't swell over to seal that.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot longer.
Yeah,
and then,
a lot
yeah.
longer. And then you can get decay starting to work down in there, and that can actually rot the tree out from the center.
And we can actually, there's a tree over here. We'll actually show, we might be able to show you what a good prune at the right part on the branch collar looks like, and how the healing process starts to look. So you got your branch collar, then obviously your branch, right? That's really simple. And then you're going to look at for a node. And node, let's zoom in over here. So your node are going to be these little spots here where they leaf out. See here? I don't know. Can you see that, Cory?
Yeah.
So this little spot, this is where it's starting to leaf out. So that's a node, or growth node. And you want to know where the growth nodes are, because we're going to take this branch off, I think. So I'm just going to show it. You want to always try to prune right at that node, and you don't want to leave much of a nub. As little as possible. If I got too much further, I'd be getting into the actual node itself where it's starting to leaf. But that's where you want to prune. And then the other one we wanted to talk about is a leaf and a leaflet, and that's going to be a little bit harder. This is an ash tree, and if it had been leafed out a little bit further, we could show it a little bit more. And maybe we'll run over here to this clematis and show it. But a lot of times people confuse leaf and leaflet, and it's important, particularly for identification, to know the difference between those two things. So maybe Cory, let's look at this butterfly bush. So this is a little buddleia. You can see you've just got leaves coming out, right? They're all coming out of a central point, or kind of in a whirl. But you've just got one leaf coming out. So that's a leaf. And then if we come over here to this clematis, also think of a tomato. Tomatoes have leaves, have leaflets. So on the clematis, I don't know if this is going to be able to see really well.
It's a little dark. But...
Yeah, so the clematis, you've got this little branch coming out. Here's your leaf, and these are leaflets. So a leaflet is basically a conjoined leaf. So it's got multiple little leaves making up a bigger leaf, and a lot of times people just think the little leaflets are leaves. Those are actually leaflets. So it's just a terminology thing that you just want to be aware of as you look through these plants. Ash tree is another really good example. Like I said, if it was leafed out more, we could show you really easily. But they have a compound leaf. So it's a larger leaf made up of smaller leaflets. So did we want to talk about care?
Yeah, I think, should we talk about why they want to know all that?
Oh,
real quick. So that is important because, so one thing you want to know is all the growth of your plant takes place in what's called the apical meristem. And that apical meristem is always in the very, very tip of that branch. So by pruning that out, you can actually bush your plant out because you've taken away its growth. The plant doesn't know where to grow. It's actually going to thicken up. So if you have a real sparse branch, just taking that little tip off will bush out the whole thing.
What's the word again?
Apical meristem.
Is that anything like a non-porous membrane?
That's right.
Just check.
That's not what I said. It was something else. With the apical meristem. Also, with your node, so where Nolan did that prune, one of these nodes is actually going to take over as a branch, and that's where you're going to get some of your directional growth. So as you're starting to shape, when you prune that off, now you know you're going to have a branch coming this way or possibly this way. Or if you prune down to here and took that off, this branch is going to really take over. So you can start to shape your plant by picking which node you prune to. I think that's important.
Cool. Okay, so before we get into some actual pruning, I want to just quickly talk about, you know, like Chris and I were mentioning, you know, we've had this equipment for years now. Some of us longer than others, apparently. But a big part of that is taking care of your equipment. And I would say probably one of the more important parts of taking care of your equipment is having some sort of sharpener. So this is a little tool I use whenever I'm going to go do some pruning. I'm going to take this with me, and this is there's a lot of different versions of this. You can get just a whetstone. You know, there's other ways to do it, but I've liked this one. I've had this for a few years, but this is really easy because after a few prunes, I can just run that right along my blade, just to give it a little hone, just to keep it cleaned up a little bit. If you need to, you can run it across a little honing stone on the side. And then the other part of this one too, this is why I really like this, is because it's got just a little bit of oil in there. And that oil, you just clean up the side of it. Just get it on those working parts. So when you're done, just work that oil in, and it's gonna make sure that you keep any gunk, any stuff from gumming up your gears, and you get a nice, easy, clean cut every single time. And so those are really just the basics for taking care of your equipment. Just keep a sharpener there. If you make a hard cut, you get cut through something hard, hone it real quick. And you can get replacement blades for them if you need to. This one has obviously not been replaced in a while. But this really will extend the life of your equipment. And also, don't leave them outside. You know, this is an expensive pruner, and I am very protective of it, so it does not get used by very many people. So you take care of it. Don't leave it outside. Don't throw it in the dirt. If you know it gets a little dirty, go clean it up, because it will just make this thing last forever, and you won't have to keep buying pruners year after year after year. So, okay, I think that was all the kind of the basics.
Bread and butters. Yep.
So I think we'll get into some pruning now. Okay.
Perfect.
So we're gonna start with. Should we start with this ash tree?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get into the ash tree. You've got, let's see, what are we gonna need? I think these branches are pretty small, so I think we can get by with our hand pruners on this one. We're gonna probably want a lopper for a few of these, so.
Yeah, we show a very bad cut, somebody that didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, definitely show that one.
So that's when we were talking about this branch was cut off here, and that cannot heal or seal itself off. So you can tell this branch is all dead, or not the whole branch, but from the node down is totally dead. I mean, it's just brown inside. So that one you would have wanted to do a cut there, that you can seal that off. But I think ultimately we want to take this whole branch off, right?
Yeah, this is a low branch, and you can see how this is getting into the lawn, and this becomes a convenience prune, right? You're coming through with the mower, and you're just dealing with it. So this is one you definitely want to take out, and we don't need to mess around. We know this whole thing is just in the way, like what Chris said. You know, you don't want to make a prune right here because it's not going to fix anything. It's still in the way. It's going to just keep growing in the way. So this one, we're going to take it all the way back to the trunk, and you just want to find your collar right there, and you can just try to maneuver your pruner and just take it off nice and flush with the branch.
Yep. Yeah, and this branch is really easy to see, the branch collar. I always like to think of that as making one leg of an A, and when you prune, you want to make that second leg of the A there too. So that's the branch collar, that real rough bark.
So this is a branch, yeah. So this is a branch you could probably leave because it is kind of growing around the edge. I would personally probably take it off. What do you think, Chris?
Personally, I would too.
Yeah.
Or at least this.
At least that, and probably this too. And that's kind of the thing with one of the things with pruning that I always like to say is you can't put stuff back. So if you want to start off a little slow and take something off and see if you like it, we know this should come off. So let's go ahead and take that off. You could do this with your hand pruner, but I got my lopper right there. So that solves some of your problem. We still have this other one. So then you can come back in, take that one off too. Now that really changes a ton with just those two branches. Now as I come through and I'm mowing, I'm not getting whacked in the face. So at that point you can make an assessment. Do I really need this here? Do I need to take it out even further? And I still think we should, because we've got this higher branch which is going to leaf out and it's going to shade this one down, which means this guy's going to keep reaching and he's going to just keep going this way. So it's really a better idea to just go ahead and take this whole branch out. And that really cleans a lot of stuff up. I mean, there's not much else we would really need to do with this. I'll just clean that up a little bit. So,
Nice.
yeah, I mean, that takes care of a lot of stuff. You know, we could make an assessment on this guy, whether it's needed. It probably isn't. And actually, here's a good example. Come in here real quick, Cory. When you're looking through these things, I've only got a couple of rules of things you should always take out. One of them is anything growing down. So you can see how this branch, this is actually dead. But if it wasn't dead, it's just growing down. And so if it's growing down, always take it off. It doesn't matter what time of year, what the tree is. If it's growing down, it's not going to be providing anything for the tree, so you can just remove it. Also, anything that's dead. And you can see, you can just go through. If it doesn't have anything growing on it, you can just take them out. I mean, those sorts of things I probably wouldn't mess with right now, but
Yeah, cleans it up.
cleans it up a little bit, yeah. Okay. So maybe let's go next and show the hedge. You want to do the hedge, Chris?
Are we going to do this one right here?
Yeah, let's just do this one.
Nice. So this is already pretty well pruned. But just to show, if you're trying to do a hedge, you want to globe shape something, or in this case, box hedge it. That's where these come in really. I mean, these are super handy. But anywhere when you're getting that little out of hand, you're just literally going along, giving it a haircut. It's super simple. You don't have to worry about finding the node like you do on a tree or anything like that. It's gonna heal. You'll probably clip some leaves in half, and that's okay.
It's just a boxwood.
It's just a
But what's nice about this too, this one's already kind of shaped, so you can see the shape. So it makes this type of pruning really easy to just maintain this, because you've already got a nice shape to it. So you can really just follow that shape, give it a little bit of growth, and then come back through and shear it up. But keep that same shape to the whole thing. And then, you know, as you go through, you'll get these little stragglers here that you can clean up, or however it goes.
Yeah, really simple. It's whatever shape you want on stuff like this. You
If
just
you-
add one, you could make a nice globe shape out of it. You're trying to
Turn it into a poodle.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have the patience for that sort of thing.
I don't.
Yeah, neither do I. It takes a lot of time. One other thing, before we move on, we're going to go around the side of this house here, and we're going to look at a few other things. Before we go on, I want to show, there's a couple of interesting things on this ash tree I just want to show really quick.
Yeah.
So let's just look at that again. So this is an ash, and if you have an ash, or you have, you know, a handful of other trees, you may have, and you're probably going to deal with this at some point. This guy had borers in it, and you can actually see where the borer holes are coming out of the trunk. There's a couple here. This is a really good one here, because you can kind of see almost like a D pattern. It's a straight edge, kind of with a loop. This is an old wound though, so this was probably, you know, 4 or 5 years old when this borer came out. And so it's not as big a deal. It looks like the tree is recovered fine without much effort. Obviously, I think she said that she hadn't done anything to this tree. So we're taking care of it. But you can see even here where some of the bark is separated. This is all borer damage, but what's actually kind of interesting, I didn't look at this before. You can actually see where it's healing, but see how the ants are coming out? The ants they're opportunistic. They find these spots. You can see the ants going in it. They probably come up here and get the aphid sap off of them. But the circle of life. All right, so what are we going to do next?
Well, let's show them why we're
Oh,
up
you want
here.
to show them
Let's
the good one?
Yeah, the good
okay.
good cut on this tree up front here. I just want to show you how that branch collar will swell over your wound. I have a good example of that on these trees right up front here. I'm really hoping Cory can zoom in on that. Can you zoom or?
I don't know if it'll be able to zoom.
Nope. We can see that was a really good cut. You can really clearly see the branch collar, that real rough bark.
So I don't know if this kind of ridge that's all the way around the outside of that prune means that it was pruned properly and it's healing. That little ridge is where the bark is beginning to overgrow that limb where it was, and it's on its way to healing. As this tree gets bigger, that wound will just continue to grow over that bark and clean it up for good. So
yeah.
Okay, so now we're gonna do a little bit of walking, so please bear with us.
Yes, look at the ground.
Yeah. I think this is a raspberry patch, right?
Looks like it.
Yeah, there's a lot of nice raspberries. We got butterfly bush, we got some. Okay, I got this stuff, so we'll go through here. So, we're not gonna take this out, but I wanted to show it. Talking to the homeowner, she really likes this tree, and it would take a little bit more than kind of the time we have here to really make this done correctly. Is this really dark right here, Cory?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, so this is one of the other rules I have about pruning. So the first one is something growing down. The second one is where they're touching. So you can see how these branches are just right next to each other. And this is bad for long-term health, because as these two branches continue to grow, they're going to actually grow into each other and make a really a difficult wound here, and could cause some long-term damage. So the difficult part about that is that, you know, with this one in particular, is to fix this, we've got to take out some pretty large structural parts of the tree, and I would say this one would just take me a little while looking at it and deciding before I cut. Don't be too hasty when it comes to this. Take your time and just kind of see what it's going to do, how it's going to look as you start to take some things out. I'll usually, start out on the edge and just start taking out things I know I need to take out, and just keep looking at it, and then you'll start to see how you can make it work. It's almost like a puzzle sometimes.
Yeah.
And you can really fix these areas, but something like this, we'd probably have to take this all the way out, but that makes other implications further up because the branch is so large, and it would just take a little bit of time, but we could do it. It would take me, I would say, getting through this would probably take me a good half hour to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
To really get this one right. So we're not going to show that. I just wanted to show where the branches are touching and talk about that.
Yeah, maybe Cory could come closer again. An example of a bad cut, you're just starting to get the decay. The tree can't seal itself over. And then an example of a really good cut, right here. That real round, smooth bark is starting to close over the
Nice.
wound there. Yep, so that's what you want to see.
Okay. So now we got a few more trees down this way we're going to go take a look at. I was trying to, they were asking me what this is. Is this Pachysandra?
No, it's that, oh, it'll come to me.
It'll come to you tomorrow.
Probably.
Yeah.
As soon as we lose signal and the video stops.
Oh, yeah.
There's a bleeding heart there. I always like coming to other people's yards and just playing name the plant.
Nice.
Because I didn't plant them, and so it's fun. Okay, so this is a maple tree, and again, there's a few problems with it, and we're going to kind of get into that. So one thing I wanted to point out first, Cory, I think were you just showing it. We've got a power line here, and when you're pruning and you're using something like a pole pruner or even this kind of equipment, be aware of your surroundings. It's really tempting to want to take that branch out, but I'm not, we're not going to for sure. But because there's a power line there, you have to be extremely careful, and I would really encourage you to probably have somebody with some different equipment to get in there and take that branch out, because the last thing you want to do is cause damage to your power line or your house or to yourself, more importantly, because it's just not worth it. Don't try to do it. You got something like that, a utility, something, go ahead and leave it there. Have somebody come and take care of it. It's going to be a lot safer for you and for your property. So, Chris, why don't you talk us through this really nice job here?
It's a beautiful job. So yeah, obviously, well, the tip of that is kind of leafing out, but this branch looks totally dead. So I think we would take it out just because of that. So I wanted to talk about the 3-point cut here. So this is, you could get away without doing it on this one, but it's the only one we have to show. So that 3-point cut, you want to do a cut on the underside of that branch. Something right there, because if you cut from the top, you have a chance of it falling and then tearing the bark as it comes down. So you just want to give a clean cut that it'll actually break that tear from. So just a real quick undercut, something like that. And then you can come up from the top and do your actual and then you do just get that nice clean cut.
Man, you're strong. Just muscled that thing right over.
Without tearing any of the bark.
And then you're gonna
and the branch collars.
And then you can still come and clean this up too. You got a little bit.
Yep, a little bit out. And I probably would get that a little bit closer there so that branch collar can seal over.
We'll come back and see if that was a good cut later.
Yeah, nice. Come back next year.
So then this is another branch. This branch is pretty much dead. There's a little bit of leaf there, but honestly, just what it's doing, it's not contributing anything to the tree. Even if this does leaf out here, you've got a really big structural canopy above it. And so this branch is kind of just wasting energy. So we don't need this guy, and a lot of it's dead. So again, with that 3-cut, we can show it a little bit more. You can do it that way. Chris, he called it a 3-cut, but he only did 2. I don't know if you noticed that.
You shorten the branches, your 3rd cut.
Right. So you're gonna take it off here. You're gonna take it off there, and you can go this way. Sometimes you can go back here. This one's not gonna really matter again. It's not that heavy. This has to do with a really heavy branch. You got to make sure you do that 3-cut, and then that way, Cory, this is going to fall right on you, so I'm not going to finish that. But that'll finish that off, and that way, again, even if this were a bigger branch, if this was twice this size, and you didn't do a 3-cut on it, and you just started cutting it, chances are it's going to tear that bark all the way down, and then you're getting into the cambium layer. And it's going to make, for a really bad situation, make a huge scar and be pretty devastating to that tree. So you can see with that, there's no way, because that cut's there, you can actually see where it tore.
Yep.
Right here, right? It actually tore right there, and it stopped at the cut. That's what this bottom cut's for, is to stop that tear. Interesting ring in here, too. I don't know what that is. It could be. So yeah, we'll clean that up here in a little bit. But yeah, so you would do your 3-cut and then come back in. Now you've taken the weight off of this, and you can cut this branch. You still might want to do an undercut just to be safe. but then you can take the rest of that stump off, and we'll finish that up here in a little bit. It's not super exciting to watch somebody saw, although I would watch somebody saw something for a long time. Okay, so the next thing I think we're gonna go through, we've got a nice little clump of aspens here, and there's a lot of little cleanup stuff we can do through this. So also, I don't know, if anybody has questions, feel free to throw them out there. We can definitely go and look at other things. And if you've got a specific situation, something you're not sure about, we might be able to find an example here to show you. So feel free to throw that out there. So let's look at these aspens. Aspens are a communal tree. They throw out, they grow by runner under the ground or stolen. I can never remember which one.
Yeah, rhizomes above ground, stolen below ground.
Stolen below ground, okay. I keep forgetting that. It's been a long time. Anyway, so they have roots that grow under the ground, and then they shoot up new plants. So this was probably actually it's probably this one tree right here. You can see the biggest one. That was probably the original tree, I would guess. Don't you think, Chris?
Definitely.
And then from out of that tree, it's grown all these little guys. And it's just, you know, they're nice for that reason. When it blows through here, I'll bet it's real nice, the wind blowing through this. But so these aspens, there's a lot of just little understory things. And all this, we just want to get it cleaned up. And this is what I would probably call pruning to limb, right? So we're trying to lift up that canopy a little bit. It's going to get us some access into here, and you can take care of a lot of things. But once you kind of get used to things, you can go really fast. And we'll leave all this for the homeowner to clean up.
Absolutely.
You're welcome, Clint.
But see, you know, something like that, you don't have to be, you kind of know, now you know where the branch collar is, you know where to prune, you can start seeing these things really easy. A lot of that material was dead, so you don't really got to think about it. You can just take it out. And you could make, I mean, Chris and I could probably do this whole thing in 10 minutes, just cleaning this stuff up.
So we just had a good question that wasn't on the outline, actually.
Okay.
So what do you guys think about pruning sealer?
Oh, yeah. We had planned on talking about that, but that's a great one. So let's get into that right now. I think, personally, I feel like if you prune properly, if your tree is healthy, you will never need a pruning sealer. I know there's people that have other opinions about it, and that's totally fine. Trees have been living for a very long time and trees do really well when we don't mess with them at all. And they don't need pruning sealers out in the wild. If you're pruning properly and you're doing these things and it's a healthy ecosystem, the tree has its own mechanisms to take care of those issues. Sap is a really good one. Sap is just, the main purpose of sap is to start healing it. It's its own sealer. Some trees don't sap as much, but that's fine because they seal themselves. They callus really quickly and they can seal off those issues and you don't have to do it. So I think the biggest argument for a sealer is if you're having an issue with borers, and the cuts can sometimes attract bugs. But I think if you're doing something like tree and shrub, systemic insect control, you're doing Thrive, you're actually going to protect the plant in different ways. And I know, Chris, you have often seen issues with them healing.
Yeah, they can
when you
actually
use a
heal
sealer.
quicker without the tar on them.
Yeah.
They'll go over that wound easier.
Yeah, and something, you know, it's just an extra step that I feel like is largely not needed. Which I know, like, we sell it in the stores, and I know it's a weird thing to say. Sorry, bosses, but you know, it's just not one I recommend. You know, if you want to do it for peace of mind, if you've got some borer issues, maybe, but generally, if you're doing these other things, you're never going to have to worry about it. So it's just not typically necessary.
Candace has asked if there's a lilac bush around, and if you can do a demonstration on that.
Are these lilacs? I think this, I don't remember, I was looking at this, wasn't sure if this is a lilac or not.
It's going to grow like a lilac. It looks
Yeah,
more like a privet.
Yeah, so it's got a similar look to a lilac.
Yep.
This one's been pruned down pretty heavily. Shoot, I wish we... So...
But yeah, in something like this, I would start to thin. Like Nolan said earlier, look for branches that are rubbing, causing problems there. But start to thin it out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, get some of the dead stuff out of there.
They get too tight and airflow doesn't go through them, then you start to get powdery mildew and different other funguses attacking. But
And lilacs are going to bloom off of last year's growth.
yeah, that's a very good point.
So that's one of your biggest things there. Who asked the question?
Candace?
yeah.
I think that's your biggest thing with a lilac is last year's growth is what's going to produce your flowers for this year. So what's growing right now, that's going to be what blooms next year. So what you'll want to do what I would do is let it grow, let it push its new growth. You'll get your flowers here pretty soon. I know the one in my backyard was already starting to push flower. Let it flower, enjoy it as it pushes its new growth. Once you see that it's kind of done, go back in and take about 20 to 30% of that new growth off. And that's going to give you plenty of space for new flowers to emerge next year. And that's also going to kind of help you control height as well. If it gets overgrown, you kind of have two options. You kind of just let it go and just let it be a really big lilac, which can be fun. Or you got to do something more like this and take it off. And that's probably why they did this. It was probably getting too big, and so they decided to just hedge it down. And with something like this or a lilac, largely it's going to be able to bounce back from something like that, and it's not going to be a huge deal. It'll just take you another year for it to start blooming.
A little bird just told me that there's actually a big lilac around the side of the house.
Oh,
the northeast
okay.
side. So
Okay, so we'll walk around. We'll find it. Okay.
We've got a couple fruit tree questions. Do you guys want to address that now, or talk about it here in a little bit?
Well, let's just go ahead and talk about it because we don't have a fruit tree here to show you. Fruit trees can be a little bit. I would say that's kind of like this is like C level pruning. Fruit tree is kind of like B level or even A level. It takes some different techniques, and Chris, you've done more of it than I have.
Yeah.
So maybe you can give them a few pointers.
Let's address Jennifer's real quick. She said, what would be the latest in the spring that you could prune fruit trees? And is there anything not to do in pruning them?
So, yeah, that's a good question. So I would not prune more than 1/3 of the canopy off. If you do more than that, they'll send up what's called water sprouts. So you get this branch that shoots straight up and it never branches off from that, and that's just a drain.
Oh, we got a spot to show a water
yeah.
sprout too.
Yeah,
Here.
so keep to the 1/3 rule. So take your canopy down by 1/3. Maybe we could look at this magnolia here and pretend it's an apple tree or something.
Let's not do too much pruning on it because
I'm not
it's
going to
new.
do any pruning.
I think they planted this last summer, so.
I'm not going to do any pruning, but on your normal tree, you want a nice central leader, good directional growth, branches up higher so you can mow around them. That'd be a normal tree. Fruit tree, you want the complete opposite. You want low branching, so it's easier to harvest the fruit as they grow. Generally, you take your central leader all the way out and open up your canopy so it makes a bowl shape, and that sunlight can come through, and it's just easier to harvest fruit and things like that.
So if this were an apple, I would probably go down to about there.
Yep, and lop that out.
And just take your central leader out about that far.
Start training these branches into your heavier fruit bearers.
And this is like where Chris was mentioning, when you prune the tips, you get lateral branching out here. That's another thing you want to do with an apple or a pear. You might let these grow out a little bit further, but then you can just do some tip pruning, and that will encourage branching this way instead of branching that way. And that's going to help get you more surface area to actually get fruit off of.
Yep.
So I'd say that's kind of the down and dirty.
I
also wouldn't prune much right now because right now they're going to be flowering or about to flower.
Yep.
And I wouldn't take too much off right now. If you've got areas that don't have any flower, probably okay. And if it's got tons of flower and it's a small tree, you might want to thin it a little bit. But that's going to be more of like flower pruning. You're going to be taking out buds so that you don't get too much fruit development. And that can depend on how old the tree is too. If it's a young tree, I would take most of the buds off, most of the flowers off early on. because I don't want to overweigh the whole branch. You know, you get a cluster of apples on this thing, and it's going to bend this thing to the ground, and it's only, you know, 12 inches long. So
yeah. And on fruit trees, they'll put out what's called a spur.
yeah,
So you'll get this little spur that sticks out of the branch, kind of like the nodes that we showed at the beginning. And that spur is where your fruit's gonna grow from.
yeah, that
Yep.
kind of works.
Yeah.
Using the magnolia. Was there another question specifically?
Well, so is there kind of a general rule of thumb you guys would list as the latest in the spring you'd prune fruit trees?
Oh, until it starts swelling, I think.
Yeah.
So once
the buds start swelling?
So yeah, so swelling is when the tree's starting to wake up and it's starting to pull moisture into the vascular system, and the nodes, these spots where the leaves and the flowers are going to come out, are starting to swell. So you'll actually be able to see them start to fill with water, essentially. And once you see swelling, that means you've got a lot of movement, you got a lot of stuff happening in the tree, and I would prefer not to prune then. Up until then,
At least a heavy pruning.
yeah,
If
sure,
it's an annoyance prune
sure, yeah,
or
absolutely.
a dead branch, I mean, any time of the year, do it.
Right,
Yeah, go ahead and take it out.
yeah,
No wrong time. But if you're doing the 1/3 rule, the earlier the better. February, March.
or just
Usually
wait
when
till
I like
fall.
to.
Wait till fall once you've harvested and it's starting to go. And you can prune fruit trees, most fruit trees, literally any time in the winter. They're hardwoods. They
Yeah,
really
they're dormant.
They're completely dormant, and you can prune a lot of material then. But you still want to stick to that 1/3 rule. Never take off more than 1/3 of anything.
Nikki Johnson also said that she needs to prune fruit trees, cherry, peach, apple, and plum, and asked if we could do a fruit tree pruning episode. Might be something to put on the list for next year. Anyway.
I think so. I think I would love to do one. I think what we'll have to do is probably a pre-recorded one, because for us to find one, we're going to have to go pretty far out from a good Wi-Fi spot.
Yeah.
So we probably can't do a live one. But I think we could probably talk to Gary and go to his orchard. I'm sure Gary could school us when it comes to fruit tree and
My father-in-law.
yeah.
Got a nice
So we've got
orchard.
some options, but we're gonna have to figure out some logistics on that
We need
one.
Jim to get a Wi-Fi signal to his orchard.
Right? Yeah, exactly. He
Yeah.
just planted a whole bunch of stuff out there.
Yeah, he did.
Another thing that we talked about but hasn't made the video yet, Karen is asking, how do you get rid of the little shoots that come out of the roots of a tree?
Oh, nice. The suckers.
Yep.
We can do that.
Yeah, we could
I'm
find them
sure.
here.
So that is a two-step process. So yeah, if you have suckers coming up out of the ground, right? We'll pretend that's a sucker and just shoved it in the dirt. But say you have a bunch of suckers coming up, just do a flush cut with the ground, clean that up, and then you'll have your little stem there. We have a product in the store called Sucker Punch, and it looks like Elmer's glue. It's a real thick, goopy stuff, but you just goop it on that wound, and it kind of seals it up and won't allow a new sucker to come up from that point.
It's got a growth regulator in it.
Yeah,
Correct.
growth regulant is kind of what we've called it.
Yeah, which depending on the tree, it's going to be a battle. If you
Right.
have crab apples or
They do.
Well,
choke
so
cherries.
since we're on suckers, let's go over to this pear tree and kind of show what some water sprouts or suckers look like.
Well, and there's a neat thing you can do with that sucker punch. Aside from just getting rid of suckers, you can actually use it as a pruning aid,
you can.
kind of shaping and stopping that growth a certain direction.
Really?
You can. So yeah, like what Cory's talking about, if you prune this out and then right behind it sends another one up, you can use that sucker punch to spray on this and it won't.
Oh, right.
keep
Yeah.
suckering.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is what we're talking about with water sprouts. Branches that are just shooting straight up. If this was a fruit tree, these would never produce fruit. They're just a kind of a drain of energy.
Well, and this is a flowering pear, and you can see it's got no flowers on it here. It's probably not going to produce a flower on it either.
Correct. Yeah.
So they're kind of a drain on the tree. They're just taking energy. You know, it's underneath the bigger canopy, so it's not getting a lot of sunlight, and they're a pain. But
Yeah.
these a lot of times are really easy. I mean, you can just take them out.
Yeah. Or the base is actually getting a ton of sun. It's actually sun scalded.
I still want them gone, Chris.
So that's sun scald. That's basically where the tree got a sunburn. Didn't have the rest of the canopy shading it. And that's what happens. If you see something like that, that's That's what it is. Basically a sunburn.
Oh, these are the lilacs we were talking about. And some that are real small like this, sometimes you can just prune them off. Taking them off by hand. That cleans that up.
Beautiful. Yeah, a few more water spreads.
All right, there's some more work for Clint to do. All right.
We just got a question from Lois real quick. How do you prune a crabapple that has a lot of straight, tall branches that are growing straight up from the crown? Suckers, basically, on a crabapple.
Yeah, probably more suckers. They're just the same. Just cut them off as low as you can and get some of that sucker punch and spray that on them when you're done, and it'll really help. It doesn't last forever. It lasts for about a season typically, I think. So you're gonna cut them all out and then spray that on there, and then you shouldn't have to deal with too much for the rest of the year. You will have to probably do some more next year. But crab apples are one of those trees that will tend to sucker quite a bit.
Yep.
Definitely.
So I think this is our lilac here.
Oh, it is starting to just about ready to flower.
It is. Buds are about to open.
Maybe
It's like
too dark to
Nolan was
see.
talking about. A lilac only blooms on last year's growth. So if you prune it too early, you'll prune all the bloom out. It won't flower. So generally I'd recommend let it flower, let it do its thing, and then this one kind of breaks the rule on that. But
Yeah.
wait till it flowers and then start to prune it back.
And I think there was probably a couple of shrubs here that were just too close together.
Yeah.
And so they really had to clean this area out, and there's some dead down here. A volunteer came up right in the middle of it, so we'd want to take that out, which could be fun. But I don't think we're gonna do that. But yeah, so like right now with your lilac, you don't need to do anything. Just enjoy it, and then it's gonna push some growth once the flowering's done, and then you can just kind of come through. And you could, if it's smaller, you could use the head shears like we showed earlier. You could prune just for shape. Or you could use your hand pruners and go in there and selectively prune some. But I think with a lilac, depending on its age, some shears would work really nicely there. So, what was there something else over here we were going to look at? I think we got.
We were going to do boxwood, but we did that on the other side.
Yeah. I think that kind of covers most of what we talked about. The other good things to do right now, today is just an amazing day for this kind of work. Being out here at 10 o'clock in the morning without a coat on is
It's nice.
pretty awesome. It reminds me of home, being in Portland. This is kind of what it's like all the time. If it's not raining, I should say. But this is a great day for this kind of work. You can do a lot of stuff. It's not going to be too hot. You can do some really good stuff and take care of a lot of things without kind of overworking yourself, which is really nice. So, what we could do is there's a maple over here that is growing out into the road. We might talk about that a little bit.
Real quick, Lois asked if we could maybe go over sharpening the blade again. Apparently it was hard to see when we did it earlier, so if you've got your sharpener on you.
I think I left it on the other side.
Then we've got another question about plum trees.
Okay.
Plum tree that's shooting straight up. Can I trim the top so it doesn't get too tall? It sounds like the tree is about 4 years old and 20 feet tall.
Yeah, more than likely you can. If it's shooting straight up, again, I would be concerned that it's got suckers on it. And if you can add is it flowering in those areas? That would be probably the biggest thing. But you could definitely take those off. If it's getting too tall, and you've got stuff that's kind of bolting, you can definitely take that down. I would probably wait a little while until we get past the flowering stage and then go ahead and do it. You got the sharpener?
Yeah.
So this is, there's two.
Get out in the sun.
Out in the sun.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm going to get it right close and personal to you, too.
Okay. That's my favorite when you're really close to me. It makes me feel safe. Okay. So this is a hand pruner. This is a little thing. You can do this a couple ways, right? So you can go something like that, and you really just run. You don't have to press. You just run it along the blade like that, and you can hear it just kind of honing that blade up a little bit. This blade probably needs to get redone. You can hone it that way if you need to, on the sides, or you can. you can even go this way, which is really nice. I really like this little thing because I do this. I sharpen my kitchen knives with this too. I clean it off though. I clean it off before I clean my kitchen knives, but yeah, it doesn't take much. You just a couple little runs across that is all you really need. And if you're doing it all the time, that edge is going to stay nice and sharp, and it'll cut really nice for you. And then, like I said, get a little bit of oil. You know, it's probably not ideal, but you can use a little bit of cooking oil, just a little regular
olive oil.
No, I wouldn't use olive oil. I try to use something really neutral, but just something. You don't want to put too much on there, but that is helpful. There's probably some better mechanical oils, but they're a little bit harder to find. Usually, you got to buy a lot of them. So
for pruning and things like that, I like mineral oil.
Yeah, some sort of
totally
mineral
neutral.
oil.
It's not going to go bad. Yeah. It's not going to spoil.
So, you know, in a pinch, you could use something like a vegetable oil or something like that. It's not ideal because those will tend to they'll start to gum up eventually if you're using it too often. So it's not ideal, but in a pinch, if you really just needed to get something on them to keep them loose, it could work. So, should we talk about this maple here? I'm not sure if we can see this very well. So this is a maple tree, and this is a maple that I know has been having a lot of hard times with iron deficiency. A lot of chlorosis. Yeah, thank you. The word was escaping me. It's too early. Haven't had enough coffee. But this is. This branch here just kind of stuck out to me when we came here first because it's really growing out into the road. And you can see how it's kind of competing with the other canopy. And so, and even as you get further out, you've got a lot of stuff that's just growing into the road. And what'll happen is, you know, you have somebody come by, you got your garbage truck there, the garbage man gets too close, he's just gonna nail these branches, and it's just gonna cause damage, and that starts to open you up to bugs and disease and causes issues. So taking something like that out all the way would be really beneficial. I'd probably take this one out, probably about to the end, because I don't see a lot of helpful growth up in here. You see, here's a branch that's growing down. You can see how right there at the right here, how it just decided to take a beeline for the ground. I mean, that's, you know, classic, something you should just take out. Regardless, you know, there's another one. But again, you know, you might come through and just kind of go slowly, take a little bit out here and there. You know, that guy is he's just causing problems. He's not going to help us out. But there's a lot of things on this branch that are just kind of causing issues, and would probably just, at some point you're going to say, yeah, it's just all going to go. So.
We got a little more information on the plum we had a question about.
Okay.
So apparently, yes, the entire tree flowered. Flowers are falling off now, and the branches are just growing up and not out. Do I just trim down before a node on branches so it fills out?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Exactly what I do. Take it down by a third.
Yeah, that'll be good. This is another one. We're not going to do this one, but here's another one I was thinking about. This spruce tree. And a lot of times with a spruce tree, you get this kind of cape at the bottom, and this is okay because we don't really need to get into there. The homeowner doesn't need to get into anything down there, so you don't need to take this out.
Kind of their privacy.
Yeah, so because we're getting some privacy with this, but this would be something you would take out. And something like here, you would just kind of look at it and say, where's my line? Where do I want it to go up to? And usually it's about 3/4. That would be pretty tall with this. But I would say, you know, this is my line right here. Right about there. And then I would just go in and start taking stuff out all the way back in. So then I get a nice clean look to the bottom of it. But like I said, we don't need to do that with this tree because it's not causing any problems. I've seen some capes where the plant was actually starting to root down into the ground. On a spruce tree. It's crazy, but A lot of stuff like that. So I think that's about it, right, Chris?
Yeah,
I don't think we had anything else.
We just had another question. How do you cut roots that are coming up from the dirt?
Roots.
The roots
that's
in the ground.
That's a tough one. So if it's just one root, I wouldn't stress about it. If you're doing more than 3, I'd be really careful because you might really start damaging the tree, the structure of it. But literally, you'd dig it up and expose that root at least enough to make a cut, and then you would just saw it off.
Yeah.
There.
And the reason, if you've got a root up at the top, those are roots that are stabilizers. Their main function, they're not pulling in a ton of water.
Right.
But they are making sure they're giving the tree its ability to sway and stay upright. So that's where they're really important. They've got to have some of those stabilizer roots to stay upright. It's what helps them keep their center of balance. So if you take too much off, now you've made it weaker in one side. So if you get a good, gust of wind or something, it's got nothing to resist that. If we get a heavy storm, it could push it right over. A lot of times, you might have plenty of root down below and it's fine. But the biggest thing, I think if you've got, a tree that's got a lot of roots coming up, the best thing to do is probably just make a well and just let it be bare soil. And try not to grow, because it's almost impossible to grow grass underneath a tree that's got a lot of root mass up at the surface. Mm-hmm. Even if you put new soil over the top of it, it's just going to go back down to what it was. So you can get maybe a year or 2 out of it, but it's just going to go right back. And on top of that, it's got a lot of shade, and grass just doesn't like to have a lot of shade forever. I usually like to make the point that grass is a shady grass is shade tolerant. It's not shade loving. So they can tolerate shade for longer amounts of time, but they can't live there forever. They will start to thin out, and you'll have to do some other work.
It sounds like this particular root is getting close to the walkway concrete.
Yeah, so that's perfect. I mean, that's another assessment you have to make. If it's going to cause damage to the sidewalk, you're going to have to pay for that one way or the other. So go ahead and take it out. Chances are
one root,
right.
I wouldn't worry about it.
And if you're getting too many of them, chances are it's the wrong tree for that area. And that's something that is a tough pill to swallow. But sometimes trees are just, there's nothing you can do. It's just not the right tree for that area. Like these 2 maples are planted way too close together. They need probably another 10 feet apart, because you can see they're growing into each other, and that causes a lot of issues in that center section. One of them is going to be dominant, and it's going to take over, and it's going to do more to damage to the other tree. Actually, I think that one on the left is dead.
Yeah, it doesn't have a single leaf on it.
Yeah. All right, well, we're going to
That might have solved that problem.
Yeah. Show them how to chainsaw
I was here yesterday scoping this out, and I didn't even notice it. But yeah, you can see this one's leafing, and that one has none. Oh, I see a little bit.
Yeah,
not much.
Some bud swell.
Yeah,
it's way behind,
a little slower.
So. We had another question. How do you trim a little off of spruce tree branches to avoid hitting the branches while mowing?
Yeah, same idea. So, if you get into the center of a spruce tree, it's all dead. Once you get in there, there's no sunlight, so that it's not going to waste the energy on needles. It's going to drop them. So if you're pruning back to where they're still, in this case, still blue, you're okay. If you get back to where it's brown, you might as well take the whole branch off, because it will never regrow again. So, but the same idea, you'll go back to your node, anything like that, do your nice clean cut, either right there at the node or clear back at a fork. You could take this whole branch off. So same rules apply. Just know if you get back to where there's no more needles, it's done.
And on a spruce tree, on a needled evergreen, if you get into that dead stuff where the needles have dropped, it will never regrow there. That's why you got to just take the whole thing out. Evergreens will not reactivate old buds or old nodes like a deciduous tree will. Deciduous tree, if it loses bud because it's got mores up further on the branch, and you cut back into it, it will reactivate those and grow new leaves. But an evergreen will never do that. It will not. So if you get into the dead material, it's dead. It's never going to grow past that. So you got to just take the whole thing out. All right. Any other questions? We'll give it a second here.
I appreciated the root question, just to watch you do the tree sway. That was pretty good.
What?
Yeah.
my my ant-like movements.
Your swaying was better than your singing, I gotta be honest.
So let's just throw this out there. Last week we did gardening, we did spring planting part 1. Our plan for next week is to do a live radio show. As if you don't know, I'm the host of the Zamzows radio show. We're doing a pre-recorded radio show this week. Next week we're going to do a live show. I'm not sure about the guests. It's probably going to be Chris or Cory. I might actually see if Jim Zamzow can come on next week if he has some time. And then the week after that, we're planning on doing another live class. We're going to do planting part 2.
Nice.
Because we're going to be right up on last frost at that point, and so we can do like our tomatoes, we can do our peppers, we can do a handful of other things. We can start planting squash and cucumbers if you're into those sorts of things. But that's the plan for right now. So if you've got some other things, we had some really great suggestions after the last class, and I just want you to know I took note of all of those. Some of them will be a little bit harder to really comply with or really make happen, but we'll try to do our best. Somebody recommended a chicken class, which I would love to do. I know Chris loves chickens; they're pretty much his favorite thing. And
chickens and horses.
he would love to teach us about chickens. But the trouble with that one is, finding someone that's got a coop and all the stuff that we can go through.
And chickens have been impossible to get this year. I mean,
it's
really
been a tough year on chickens. So. But I know there's a lot of new people doing it, so we'll try to figure out a way to make that happen. But if you've got other suggestions and you're seeing this video after the fact, or you're seeing it right now, please feel free to recommend or ask us to do some things, and we'll do our best to make those things happen. This was a recommended show. Somebody wanted us to do pruning, and hopefully it was helpful. I think we covered quite a bit of material, and this is probably the best way to teach somebody about pruning is to do it. I mean, the only better way would be to have 10 people standing right here and going through it, but we can't do that right now. But at some point maybe we can make that happen, but right now we can't, obviously. So if you have other suggestions, please let us know. We want to keep doing these classes. We love doing them. We're having a great time, and I hope you guys are getting a lot out of it. So
after the suggestions last time, though, Chris and I talked, and we will both quit if it comes down to your hair care video.
I think we got some classes we can do before that. So
good.
Yeah, we've got some time. So before we're running the well dry. So, all right, I think we got it. We about covered it, right, Chris?
No
I think so. Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, everybody. We appreciate it. Stay safe. We will talk to you. We'll be live again in a couple weeks. Have a great weekend.